The following video was prepared by the District of Columbia Government Office of Disability Rights and provides information on reasonable accommodations in the workplace, as defined by the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, or ADA, Title I, Employment.
Hello, my name is Derek Orr. I'm the Director of the DC Office of Disability Rights. One of the key non-discrimination requirements of Title I of the ADA is the obligation to provide reasonable accommodation for employees with disabilities. Over the next few minutes, you are going to see a short video that provides information about reasonable accommodations, policies and procedures, how to recognize and handle accommodation requests, how to determine effective accommodations, and what types of accommodations might be reasonable. Our city prides itself on the diversity of our workforce, an environment that represents people from many different backgrounds and life experiences. This workplace environment increases employee morale and causes employees to desire to work more effectively and efficiently. Some in our workforce have physical disabilities or mental health issues. It is important to understand that not all disabilities are visible. Each employee's situation is unique, and each situation requires a personal, reasonable accommodation plan. There is no one-size-fits-all approach. Many reasonable accommodations may seem common sense, a better fitting chair, a larger computer monitor. But some accommodations are more complex, but all have the same goal: to make district employees successful and motivated in the workplace. The District of Columbia is required by federal and district laws to provide equal employment opportunity to qualified individuals with disabilities. The Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, the ADA, and the DC Human Rights Act of 1977 seek to eliminate discrimination against individuals with disabilities to ensure that our workforce is as diverse and energized as the city we live and work in. Thank you for watching this presentation. That will help you to better understand what reasonable accommodations are and support the great work you do for the District of Columbia government.
Reasonable accommodations.
Hi, my name is Hayden Dimas, and I'm the ADA Compliance Specialist for Employment with the Office of Disability Rights. DC government agencies are required by the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, to provide reasonable accommodations for qualified employees and applicants with disabilities, when necessary, to allow them to perform the essential functions of their jobs, unless the accommodation would pose an undue financial or administrative burden to the agency, or a direct threat to health or safety of employees and/or customers.
Who is considered a person with a disability?
A person with a disability is an individual with a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more of the person's major life activities, such as walking, lifting, seeing, performing manual tasks, speaking, hearing, learning, reading, personal care and grooming, and other activities, or an individual with a record of such an impairment, or an individual who's perceived to have such an impairment.
How do you determine if a reasonable accommodation is appropriate?
The decision as to the appropriate accommodation must be made on a case-by-case basis. The principal test is that of effectiveness, that is, whether the accommodation will provide an opportunity for a person with a disability to achieve the same level of performance and to enjoy benefits equal to those of an average, similarly situated person without a disability. However, the accommodation does not have to ensure equal results or provide exactly the same benefits.
DC agencies are mandated by the ADA to provide reasonable accommodations to people with disabilities. The ADA defines a person with a disability as someone with a physical or mental impairment which substantially limits one or more major life activities. Reasonable accommodations are evaluated on a case-by-case basis.
I am Susie McFadden Resper. I am an ADA Compliance Specialist in the DC Office of Disability Rights. My disability is polio and rheumatoid arthritis, both of which limit my mobility. Because of my physical limitations, I requested reasonable accommodations once I began working in the DC Office of Disability Rights. Some of the reasonable accommodations that I requested were an alternative work schedule. That was because it helps control my fatigue level. Reserved parking space, because I drive to and from work, and I'm it's difficult for me to use public transportation, and a place to park my mobile chair, because I use the mobile chair on a daily basis to help me achieve and perform the functions of my duties.
When and how do you request a reasonable accommodation?
The ADA states that you can request a reasonable accommodation in writing, verbally, or have another individual make that request for you. I made my request in writing. Once my request was made, I sat down with my director and we discussed ways in which those accommodation requests could be granted.
What are the benefits of reasonable accommodations?
It allows an individual with a disability to participate in the workplace as well as compete in the workplace using the same standards and guidelines that an employer would use for an individual who does not have a disability.
You can request a reasonable accommodation in writing, verbally, via email, or through another person. Reasonable accommodations allow people with disabilities to participate and compete in the workplace.
My name is Jessica Hunt, and I'm the Special Projects Coordinator and Attorney for the DC Office of Disability Rights. I started working here about 2 years ago in 2011, and I'm a person with cerebral palsy, which is a mobility disability. One of the things that I needed in order to do my job to the best of my ability was help typing. So the reasonable accommodation that I require is a voice recognition software program called Dragon Naturally Speaking, and it will actually type out what I speak. So it took my typing speed from 35 words per minute to 90 words per minute, and it makes me a lot more efficient at my job, which does require quite a bit of writing.
What is the difference between marginal and essential job functions?
Everyone coming into their job has to be able to perform the essential functions of their job, whether or not they have a disability. Everyone should be able to do the major duties of their position. However, marginal functions can be passed from person to person if someone with a disability enters a job and can't do some of the marginal functions that maybe the person who was in that job before could do. What that's called is job restructuring, because it takes away some of those functions the person with a disability can't do that are not essential to their job and gives them to somebody else who can perform them.
Is there ever a reason why a reasonable accommodation request would not be granted?
An accommodation might not be provided when it's unreasonable. An accommodation is unreasonable when it's unduly burdensome to the agency, either financially or it changes the way that the agency does business. One example of an unreasonable request for an accommodation would be if a person is a wheelchair or scooter user and they work in an agency which has a very narrow office. The person then asks for the whole office to be restructured or reconfigured so that they can navigate through the office. The agency restructuring or reconfiguring the office could take days out of the agency's business time. It could be unduly burdensome financially because it could take hundreds of thousands of dollars. And not only that, but there are reasonable alternatives for the individual to have an accommodation, such as moving that person's office to another location which is accessible to them, or if they can only enter the front of the office, moving their cubicle to the part of the office that they can access, or even allowing the person to telecommute from time to time if it's really going to be an issue with them getting in and out of the office space.
Essential job functions are required to be performed, but marginal job functions can be assigned to other employees. A reasonable accommodation may not be granted if it is unduly burdensome to the employer.
My name is Mary Campbell. I'm the Risk Manager and ADA Coordinator with the Department of Behavioral Health in the District of Columbia.
Who do I request the reasonable accommodation from?
We have someone in every office. If they don't come directly to me, they are able to go to their supervisor, to an HR manager, and ask for the accommodations. And most of them will be referred back to my office so I can facilitate their request for an accommodation. They could send us an email or just walk into the office and say, I would like to have an accommodation, or say I would need help in a particular area, what can I do? and we would help walk them through the process of filling out the application, and that application says exactly what they're requesting. And we try to have an interactive process with each individual because all accommodations are very unique and they're tailored toward that individual.
What documentation do I need for the request?
There's no documentation that they need when they apply for an accommodation. We provide a form for them, they fill out, and we have to have a consent for the medical information if required, and that gets the ball rolling for their accommodation.
Is my request confidential?
I keep all of their information extremely confidential. It's only on an as-needed basis.
How do you help determine the best accommodation?
Well, an individual may request an accommodation and the accommodation may not fit their office space, or there's another technology out there that's better. And so we'll sit down, we'll look at each specific accommodation, and we let them have a field or test for it and to see what best fits their needs.
What types of reasonable accommodations can be provided?
We have accommodation of chairs, we have accommodations of computers, large letter and keyboard, magnifiers, digital software that may read the screen for them, interpreters.
Every office has someone who serves as the ADA coordinator, HR manager, or supervisor to handle requests. No documentation is required. Each agency may have their own request procedure. All requests are confidential. The ADA coordinator will work with you to determine the best reasonable accommodation.
Hopefully this short video has given you a better idea of the reasonable accommodations that are available to us and how easy the process is to request and obtain an accommodation if you have a disability that requires one. Our goal is to make our entire workforce more productive and successful. It is so important that each one of us is contributing to our city's goals to the best of our ability. If you need an accommodation due to a disability, ask for it. Let us give you the tools and resources you need. That helps all of us make a difference. Thanks for watching, and thanks again for your great work.
For more information, please contact the Office on Disability Rights Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. until 5 p.m., except district holidays. We are located at 441 4th Street Northwest, Suite 729 North, Washington, D.C. 20001. Our phone number is 202-724-5055. To send a fax, use our fax number, 202-727-9484. For TTY, call 202-727-3363 or email odr@dc.gov. You can also find out more by finding us on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube.